Hello and welcome to IGPP Expert Talks. I'm Heena Goswami, editorial consultant with IGPP, Institute for Governance, Policies and Politics, New Delhi. At IGPP Expert Talks AI Special Series, we make artificial intelligence make sense. Whether you're a curious beginner or just trying to keep up with the fast changing world, our guests help you understand how AI is shaping our lives and how you can be part of the conversation. From smart assistants to deepfakes, ethical dilemmas to everyday tools, we'll break it down all in simple language. And today in this quest, we are joined by Dr. Aditya Vishwanath. Dr. Aditya Vishwanath is an education technology researcher and entrepreneur. He's the co founder of MakerGhat and is currently a research scientist at Stanford University's Graduate School of Education. He's also the co founder and CEO of Inspirit, a virtual reality and AI education company for experiential learning and training. Welcome to IGPP Expert Talks.
Thank you for having me here. Excited to be a part of this series.
So you have been writing extensively on AI literacy. Could you please briefly explain to us what do you mean by AI literacy and what are its core components?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I will kind of start off with saying that to just draw a very simple analogy to me and to a lot of us working on this on AI literacy initiatives. AI is another tool that has arrived that can be deployed for problem solving in creative and possibly in very powerful ways. And if I had to draw the analogy to other tools that we use on an everyday basis, tools like a calculator. We know how to deploy a calculator for performing certain forms of mathematical computations in a very powerful way. It saves us time. It allows us to skip a number of manual steps, and it allows for problem solving at a speed, at a level of efficiency, at a level of accuracy that was not possible before the calculator existed. Now, to be able to use a calculator, you still need to have certain basic numerical literacies available. Otherwise, a calculator to you is just an alien object. It is just an interesting gadget with a bunch of buttons on it that you don't know how to operate. The same applies to more advanced calculators. If you have to use a scientific calculator, you need to know the basics of the literacies of the numerical literacies that go behind you knowing how to operate and perform functions on a scientific calculator or a graphing calculator and so on. Um, that's exactly what AI literacy is to me. It is the set of literacies, the set of understandings, the set of skills, the set of knowledges that an individual needs to have to be able to accurately and most effectively use AI in their everyday life for problem solving, for everyday activities, in simple and in also very complex ways. I spend a lot of time thinking about AI literacy in the context of schools and children, young people. And so the questions that we are trying to ask is, just as we build numerical literacies or language literacies in young people, which then gives them a set of skills or literacies that allow them to use these tools in their everyday lives, what might be the analogous AI literacies that they need to have to be able to effectively use AI when they inevitably encounter it on an everyday basis.
India, is still a developing country and we're still grappling with the problem of digital illiteracy in many parts of our country.
Mm.
So, how do you think that we should make this leap from AI, from digital literacy to AI literacy? Is it necessary at this point? And should the two goals be integrated, or we need to, make some bridges to ensure that we are improving on both ends?
See, I mean, you can solve multiple problems at the same time. I feel like problem solving is not a linear path, but it is a parallel pathway where you can be asking related questions and finding ways to address and solve them in their own ways and simultaneously. I will also say that, yes, there is some correlation between an AI literacy and a digital literacy in that, like, most engagements with AI happen on digital platforms and happen on devices that one needs to first have access to and know how to use. I will, however, also say that say we operate under the assumption that access to tools, access to digital literacies are moving forward, are moving ahead at the pace that they are. I think there is something to be said about the literacies that go behind learning how to work with and engage with AI that have nothing to do with technology, that have nothing to do with coding, nothing to do with programming, nothing to do with knowing how to use a computer. And this comes from the fact that most young people today in the country, largely regardless of socioeconomic background, have at least used or have access to a smartphone. I wouldn't say 100% of all young Indians, but I will say a very large percentage of young Indians today have access to some basic feature smartphone, with access to some basic internet capabilities. And if they have even spent a few minutes watching a YouTube video or scrolling through a social media application, they have seen AI, because AI is doing recommendations for them. AI is providing them advertisements. They are already in many ways engaging with AI-based tools, even in the most basic interactions with these devices. So when we say AI literacy, we're coming from that perspective of just recognizing when you see AI in your everyday life, whether it is at work, whether it is in your everyday lived experiences in small and also in big ways as well. And I would say that there needs to be an effort towards building those literacies in our young people that have to happen in parallel to the activities around advancing digital literacy across the country. Again, I'm talking in the context of young people who are inherently more tech savvy, who are inherently kind of disposition to having access to or seeking access to technology, one way or the other. It is a different set of challenges and a different set of problems we'd have to solve for an older audience, where there is still truly a real gap in digital literacy, and there is still a lot of work that needs to be done over there. And I would say you're right in that, like, we do have to kind of address some related problems, some related challenges simultaneously for us to truly succeed in having AI literacies be spread out and AI literacy programs be spread at scale in an equitable way across the board. But I will kind of re-emphasize that these things can happen in parallel, that this shouldn't be a linear path that we follow. Others, we will again be playing catch up as a nation.
As you mentioned, that majority of Indian youth do have access to, let's say, a smartphone. But we do also realize that there are glaring inequalities in how much, what kind of internet, digital devices they have access to or their understanding. And we
Mhm.
have a lot of digital divides in sense of gender, relating to gender, geography,
Mhm.
income, language, generation, a lot of it. Do you think we need to do a lot of foundational work on infrastructure before we talk about AI literacy? Or again, can that, sort of go parallel? But where do you think we need to do a lot of foundational work before we take in the challenge of AI?
100% yes. So I'll take a slightly different perspective here, and kind of share why kind of working on AI literacy is exciting to me in the context of this question that you just asked me. So you're absolutely right. We have serious inequities across gender lines, across caste lines, across various other divisions, across again rural, urban, and a number of others. And these divides and these gaps are very evident in certain parts of the country, less so in others. They show up in very different and very diverse ways, and problem solving needs to be hyper contextualized. The way we think about the deployment of these tools, these technologies, need to be hyper contextualized. Now, it's very interesting because if I had to break down certain features of AI literacy, and kind of what are kind of the key skills or the key outcomes that we are trying to promote when we say we want to make a young person AI literate, a lot of those things, a lot of those skills, a lot of those goals, those learning outcomes are very similar to learning outcomes that a lot of people have been shouting about or saying that we need to have for a very long time. Outcomes like building critical thinking skills, building problem solving skills, building agency, giving people the tools to be empowered to problem solve in their everyday lives, um, building employability outcomes and skills across the board. A big push for AI literacy, by the way, is the fact that if we don't make our young people AI literate, they're not going to have jobs tomorrow, or the jobs that they're in are going to become automated, and they will not be able to remain resilient in the workforce tomorrow. And so the the interesting thing about AI is the funding that an AI mandate can unlock today in today's market and today's kind of fascination and an occupation with AI might be the funding that we have desperately needed for a very long time to try to address a number of these inequities in society. a number of these digital divides, a number of these other infrastructure gaps that might exist. For example, I've been working with a couple of partners at a few different state governments where they're looking at introducing AI literacy programs in schools. And their way of doing it is saying we're going to deploy computer labs in schools and we're going to build all these computer labs because that's how our kids are going to then engage with and work with AI, which is really incredible because a lot of people, a lot of folks on the ground have been saying we need computer lab infrastructure for a very long time. And finally, it's AI that has unlocked the funding to make that happen. So to me, AI is in many ways the MacGuffin, the driving factor that's kind of moving the entire conversation forward. And a lot of our kind of secret agendas behind the scenes are to do the things that are not very attractive, the non-sexy stuff with AI. It's the stuff around like how do we actually build confidence in a young child? How do we build agency in them? How do we give them the skills and the tools that allow them to better navigate the workforce tomorrow, that allow them to have access to the opportunities and the resources that they may not already have access to because of historic barriers or certain socio-political or socio-economic barriers that they have faced for their lifetime or for generations. Certain communities have faced that for a long time in our country. I think in some ways, the AI literacy narrative is almost like the Trojan horse within which we are trying to actually ask some of these very basic questions and trying to address some of these very fundamental goals. Having said that, I don't want to discount the fact that these are real challenges that have to be addressed and solved for. So to really do this well, we have to be explicit about them as well, saying that yes, for us to truly deploy a successful AI literacy curriculum, we absolutely need certain reforms in infrastructure, certain reforms in access, certain intentional focuses on minority and underrepresented communities, who historically will be the last to receive these new interventions. And we have to be very intentional about some of those things. Absolutely agree with you there.
On that note, do you think we need to change our whole approach to how we see education, the importance of education, how we make our children learn in colleges and school? And because of the new challenges posed by AI, I feel some of the methods that we have been learning through in school, in colleges, wouldn't be effective anymore. You don't need to like now learn figures and facts. You can Google them, right? So why do you think we need to change our approach to education in that manner?
Oh, absolutely. I love that you asked this question because it's a question that's on a lot of people's minds, which is, we're seeing all of this stuff with AI. You're saying we want to build these critical thinking skills and have people like be equipped to use AI and all of these new tools in powerful ways. But if you just look at our schooling system and you look at it, and again, I'm generalizing and speaking at large, we still are stuck in basically, I would say, a relic of the past, in that we're in a school system where we still prioritize information recall, memorization, kind of this idea of like learning facts and information and then repeating that information on a test. The test is not really testing any sort of problem solving ability. The exam is testing primarily information retrieval, knowledge retention, and the ability to know a lot of things, but not the ability to actually solve problems and apply them in real world contexts. And you are absolutely right. A lot of us, I personally have dedicated most of my career so far and moving ahead as well towards this key question of how do we actually reform what we mean learning to be in the classroom. Like, how do we reform what we should center in the classroom as real, true learning? And I love that we have this kind of rapid, massive shift that we're seeing with AI in classrooms. I love actually, and this is probably a hot take and a radical take, but I love that students are actively using AI to game the system in so many ways, all the time, right? I mean, when the one of the first GPT-3 3.5 models was out, there were some reports about how it you fed it the NEET exam and it answered the NEET exam and got a perfect score on the NEET exam almost immediately. You have students completing a lot of these kind of cookie cutter projects and assignments and essays by just working with AI at home and getting the work done completely end to end. I love that that is happening, because what it's doing is, for the first time, it is revealing to everybody very evidently where our system is broken. It is very clearly revealing to everybody without anybody needing to preach it, without anybody needing to advocate for it. Our young students are revealing to the system, to the administration, to the leadership, to the country at large, that we have a system that is testing for things that aren't relevant anymore. At one point of time, historically, it was important to know things. It was important to know and have access to information. But when we started having the internet, which happened 20 years ago, information retrieval was no longer a priority. Now, a lot of problem solving, especially basic problem solving, can happen by the machine. So all of a sudden, there is a higher level of skills, a higher order of problem solving that our young people need to have in the world today, and we are absolutely not testing for that. So the rapid advancements of AI are going to naturally threaten the very foundations of our assessment structures, the very foundations of our curriculums in school, the very foundations also of just the kind of incentives that exist in our school systems today. When I say school, I even refer to a large part higher ed, though in higher ed, you see a lot more diversity. You have some excellent examples of higher ed in the country. You also have some not so excellent examples. Same is true for K-12 education as well. But when you look at kind of primary public education in the country, it is still stuck in that traditional model and mindset of memorization. And if we don't proactively make changes, and very serious radical changes, not incremental changes, to how we do assessments, how we train teachers, how we incentivize success for various stakeholders in the system, then the system is going to come crumbling down. This is a tsunami that is going to completely crush the system. And it is going to, of course, harm our children first, and then a lot of other people in the ecosystem. But to me, one way or the other, change is going to happen. It will happen in a very harsh and painful way, which will be driven by the advancements of these new technologies, or it can happen in a more elegant, proactive way, if we take very proactive and real changes. Of course, the latter is the desirable strategy. But if change is what's going to happen in both cases, I guess one way or the other, at least we'll see what we have been hoping to see for a very long time.
What you have said about like higher ed being part of that discourse is equally true. I have one query, and that is based on some of the experiences of, on one hand, talking about AI, and on another hand, teaching history in a local Delhi University college. And I feel happy that my students know about ChatGPT and can incorporate like what they, I mean, we have libraries that are still rudimentary. We have a large number of students. I mean, even if there are books, they probably wouldn't suffice for a class of 60 or 50 students. But what happens is that students now can put their assignments in ChatGPT, get a ready-made answer, and also like put old question papers in ChatGPT, get the answers, just read them, crunch them, and go to the exam and write them down. But what happens, or from a teacher's perspective, that while I'm happy that my students know about ChatGPT, which I'm sure that the students back in colleges in my village or district may not be as aware of or do not have the access to. I am happy that my students know that. But then the problem that happens is that I think that the skills that they would have developed from a course like history honors, which is of reading, of comprehension, of being able to put in writing their ideas, of structuring their ideas, they're losing on all those traditional skills, right? And it wouldn't prepare them for an job market in journalism, research, or like teaching, or I mean, so they are using ChatGPT. Would you consider that part of being AI literate? And how about the loss of traditional skills that they would have gained through a course like history?
See, I don't think these are competitive ideas. And I kind of want to kind of draw and pull out certain specific distinctions here. So you're right in that an ideal history class or a history course or a history lesson at every level, whether higher ed or below, the goals of teaching history are exactly what you said, right? To build critical thinking abilities in our young people, to build the ability to read effectively, write effectively, reflect effectively, seek truth effectively, because a lot of history is about who wrote it, and who spoke about it, and what was the context in which it was said, and what were the various complexities that went behind how these things were done. That is not the history I had when I was growing up in CBSE schools my entire life. To me, history was memorizing the dates of when the Battle of Buxar happened and when the First War of Independence happened. And knowing about these events is important, but if that was what the test was asking me to recall, about which king did what to who, I think we're losing the point of why we teach history. We teach history for all those things that you said in the very beginning. And the first thing AI does is it eliminates the need for those memorization activities. It eliminates the need to remember those dates anymore. So I really like that students are using GPT enabled tools for competing with or combating the need to mug up all of this information. Now, a sensible curriculum, a sensible educator, a sensible education system would recognize this, that finally we have to come to terms with the fact that the way we test history, the way we evaluate in a history class is completely broken and can be gamed. And hopefully, the sensible decision there is to not clamp down on the usage of these tools, but to recognize that we need to now increase our focus on these other things, on these things that we have aspired to do with history, but in reality, we have never really done. And we have to be honest with ourselves over there. I can ask. I would take a bet that most of my Indian friends who have grown up in an Indian education system, even at the higher ed level, who have taken a history course, are not going to tell me that they came out of the history course with stronger writing skills or reflection skills or problem solving skills or analytical skills or research skills. And if they did, then kudos to the educator who created that environment, and kudos to the curriculum that enabled that to happen. And I would argue that those programs are safe from an AI tool today, because the nature of evaluation there is such that it requires you to problem solve on the spot at that moment of time. It requires you to have deeply reflected on the subject matter beyond the information, beyond the facts that were presented in a historical event or a historical scene that took place, but to reflect on the why and the how and the who and the when and the where and the context of all of those things. And I think we have an opportunity finally to be able to, again, like I said in the previous response, really rethink how we do assessments, how we do curriculums, how we empower our teachers to create those environments in the classroom. And we should not react to these AI tools entering into classrooms with the mindset of, oh, these are threatening existing things, threatening our existing skills or our goals, threatening our existing status quo. But we should instead embrace it, I think, and recognize that what it is eliminating are actually things that were redundant for a very long time.
I'm really sorry that I started. It made me laugh. The thing that you said about, his a part of history is also about questioning who wrote it, who's writing history. And now it has become such a politically volatile question that we in classrooms have to be
Mm.
so politically correct. And we have to ensure that we don't offend anyone, even when we are sort of speaking the truth, or we so I feel like the discourse has to go in a completely opposite direction. And how I see the things in university colleges are totally pulling young people down. And
Hmm.
it's very
That's a
disappointing.
different set of questions that have to be answered. That wasn't what I was responding to. I was responding primarily to our challenge with how we assess what happens in classrooms and schools today, and what success looks like in a history class. But you're right. I mean, we need to have classrooms have to be safe spaces. They have to be safe spaces where we can talk about uncomfortable things, whether we agree with them or not. And I would like to believe that we aspire towards those sorts of curriculums collectively as a nation, as a group of people in all ways. And it's always going to be a fight. It's always going to be a struggle. It happens all over the world. It's not a uniquely Indian challenge. And our hope is that we can do this in very equitable ways.
A few decades ago, India introduced computer literacy programs in schools and colleges as part of its effort to digitally empower its population. Do you think that we need such AI literacy programs to get today? Should they be targeted? Should they be coupled with already existing curriculum frameworks? Or how do you think we should institutionalize AI literacy as a core curriculum agenda? And should it be led by the government? Should it be led by private actors? How should we go about it?
Lots of questions there and lots to unpack there. But I think the easy answer is, and the correct answer is, that it has to be taken on a case by case basis, and there is no single solution for the entire kind of spectrum of education, right? There is learning outside of formal classrooms as well. There is learning at all levels, and we have very complex education systems and structures in various ways. So it has to be taken on a case by case basis, and all these stakeholders have a role to play. I will say, there is one simple way to introduce AI literacy is through the computer course or the program, which has already been created as space on the calendar in most curriculums or in most classrooms in the country right now. But I will also say that we should not fall into the trap of seeing AI literacy as coding. Those are not the same things. And I need to underline that and re-emphasize that multiple times. AI literacy is not reserved to technical people, is not reserved to people in STEM, not reserved to engineers alone. And AI literacy, very much like numeracy, very much like language, needs to be visualized and needs to be recognized and understood as a literacy that shouldn't be tied to the usage of programming tools or writing code, but it is knowing how to engage with these tools without having any knowledge about coding, without having any technical background. And as long as we are aware of that when we say and when we refer to being AI literate, we aren't saying you need to know how to code in Python or code in Java. But what we're saying is you need to have certain fundamental problem solving abilities and skills. You need to have certain fundamental understandings of how to best and most effectively leverage AI, where it fails, where it succeeds, how it is going to evolve, and how you can stay at the cutting edge of this tool so that you remain relevant in the workforce, you remain relevant as a productive contributor and citizen to society. If we center those skills, I think then we're closer to the definition of AI literacy that we are going after.
Recently, the United States announced an executive order titled Advancing AI Education for American Youth, aimed at incorporating AI learning into its national education strategy. What are your thoughts on this development, and do you think there are key lessons that India can draw from such international initiative or chart its own path towards AI education and awareness?
So I was very happy to see that executive order, and I think it's an excellent step by the government in the US to kind of to pass that, regardless of it becoming policy or becoming something that's intentionally applied. It signals something very powerful, and the signaling effect that comes from an executive order of that kind itself is massively beneficial to the movement across the entire country. And the country, I mean the US. Yes, India can learn from it, but I'll also say India is already doing it in its own ways. Yes, we don't have a national AI strategy or an AI literacy program or mandate yet. I think it is around the corner. But I think at the state level, a number of states have already taken the charge in making this happen. I for one, have been working quite extensively with the Tamil Nadu Education Department, and Tamil Nadu was one of the first states in the country that announced that they're going to be implementing AI literacy curriculums as early as sixth grade across all their government schools in the state. All of them, rural, urban, regardless. There are over 33,000 government schools in Tamil Nadu. And they intend to be doing that starting this next school year, which is a few months away from us right now. And so I think we need to celebrate those moments and those stories as well, where we see the signaling effect and the intentionality coming from leadership top down, because a lot of us are day to day, the work we do is very bottom up. We're really thinking very deeply about how do we really kind of address the challenges and the opportunities at the very, very bottom, right? Looking at the grassroots challenges and opportunities in infrastructure, in training, in building capacity with various stakeholders across the board. And so when you see the signaling coming top down, when you see the intentionality top down, it really enables the bottom up work to happen much more effectively. And you really need both of those things. You can't be working alone in your silo bottom up. You won't really see significant scale and significant progress and sustainability of your program. You have to have the top down work also coming. You have to have the policy reform. You have to have the leadership that creates space, that makes the mandates, that writes the bill, that says that, okay, schools have to find ways to allocate time on the calendar for this to happen. And here are the key goals and here are the key outcomes. And we are going to recognize this in our state board education assessment or blah, blah, blah. So it's great to see that happening. It's happening all over the world. Multiple countries have been embracing an AI literacy strategy or program. I think it is critical for India to move very fast here. Otherwise, we will once again be playing catch up on another technology, another technological change or evolution that started in certain parts of the West and is now being adopted and is now being set up in the country as largely an afterthought. And I think a proactive approach by local, state, and central government bodies to create strategies, to build frameworks, to enable the ecosystem to then scale it in different ways. You are going to need private players. You're also going to need public players in this space. There is no single player that's going to solve the scale of the problem that we're talking about over here. But what the government can do is to create a favorable environment and a climate where people can act, where people can do some of this work, and this work can be recognized as real, legit stuff that needs to happen in the country at scale.
Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for this very